Hi, we had a great talk on our RAID exploration last evening. We talked about the RAID tools, that there's iris, birth order, family tree, cycles and seasons, and you can be looking at different symptoms and challenges at different times of a lifespan. Because we just had the summer solstice, we focused on this month in the Northern Hemisphere, which was the one girl time. And we talked about the attributes of one girl. We talked about how she can be very nurturing, she's a caretaker, often feels very responsible in the family. So tends to take on probably too much, can be a little bit overburdened. She also represents the ancient memory. So she's the rock, she's solid. She holds the mitochondrial DNA for thousands and thousands of years. So she tends to replicate patterns. So we talked about patterns in the family tree that the one girl is going to often replicate, but sometimes those patterns are not healthy. So the goal really would be to do her two girl. So to move from that family dynamic and be her own self, be her creative self. The two girl represents creativity, imagination, something totally new, and she really does separate from the family. So that would be the natural progression. Then the next step would be the three girl. So going to that three girl stage of caretaking for others, being part of a community, sharing. So that would be a natural next step. But the follow up to that is you also don't want to take on too much within your community, and you need to learn to do your four girl, which is let go. So, how do you let go? Well, you learn to not take on too much. You learn to just allow and accept. We also talked about the five girl, which is really our connection to everyone and feeling compassion for everyone. But we don't need to take on those problems. We actually need to just do our own work and be compassionate with ourselves. We talked about that as being really important, to have self-care and self-compassion, because ultimately that will bring us to the sixth girl, which is grace and a connection to something higher. So we kind of went through that evolution of the girls and touched briefly on how that progression also factors in with the boys. We had a perfect example of a three girl, two boy. So we looked at the birth order, where the three girl, she's the third girl behind a girl first, then the boy. So she's also two behind a boy, but she's also the second girl. So when you have those different combinations, it makes for kind of a richer, more dynamic type of person, because you've got gifts from both sides of the family tree. So we talked about the one girl as having a connection to father's mother. Well, the three girl has a connection to the mother's father's, the father's father's mother, as well as the mother's mother. So she's got the three girl on the father's side and the two girl on the mother's side, as well as being two behind a boy, so that's the father's father. So there's a lot of fire and yang, but also the quiet, that two girl, which is feeling oriented, very empathetic. And then as the three girl, she's going to take that empathy out into the community. So it's going to be for beyond her family. And so then again, the challenge is to be able to care for self, to let go, take on what's okay, but not take on other people's stuff. So those were some of the things that we discussed. And we also talked about that natural progression of looking at all 12 months as different divine attributes. So we would be looking at that one girl, so nurturing and a solid foundation is really important, but you also have to be your individual self as the two girl. And then as a three girl, you need to share resources, you need to have equity and fairness and be a part of your community. The 4 girl is going to also learn to be accepting, non-judgment, judging, allowing, and then go to that 5 girl having the compassion for all people and having a greater connection to something higher. So that was the girls that we mostly talked about, but there's also that progression on the masculine side, going from a 1-3-5 boy, the innocence and sweetness of that initial inspiration, but asking for the truth. So as always, we talk about the protocol, which is really asking for the truth. And in asking for the truth, are asking to see what we've been unwilling to see or feel, to feel those feelings so that we can heal them for ourselves, for others, and for all. And then when we seek the truth, we actually are able to really be in a position to be able to share our gifts, which is the 5 boy. And then we're going to go from that 5 boy place to the 2 boy passion of initiation, 4 boy sharing it with others, and 6 boy really transmitting it to the all. So we kind of went through this whole process, and we also talked about how the 1 girl is very much connected to what was put in place by that 2 girl. So whatever the 2 girl in the fall, 9 months before, is leaning into, what she is choosing for herself, now gets initiated and replicated with the 1 girl 9 months later. So it's a pretty interesting dynamic that we were able to kind of follow and share about.